What if I told you? The thing that's been draining your soul wasn't what happened to you, but the silence that followed it. The moment you felt scared, confused, and didn't tell anyone, not because you didn't want to, but because deep down, you already knew they couldn't hold you. That's not your fault. But it is your story, and today it's time to take it back. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could change how you see your past forever.
If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or like the wounds from your past still hold you back, you're not alone. This space is for you. Here, we heal, we grow, and we rediscover who we truly are. Beyond the pain, beyond the past. And if you're ready to step into your healing journey and finally embrace your authentic self, hit that subscribe button. Because your inner child matters, and together, we can rewrite your story.
There's a difference between default and fault. Okay, default, you didn't know you were doing it. You didn't know any better. You were just following patterns that were programmed into you. But it's not your fault, okay? There's a huge difference, important distinction. Number one. Number two, it's never the child's job to make the parents happy or to create peace in the family. And the child invariably fails, which instills a huge sense of guilt and inadequacy for not having fulfilled a task that never ought to be in yours, never should have been yours in the first place. It's a reversal of roles, because whose job it is to hold who emotionally, to create peace. And so when a child is forced into that position, again, as an adaptation to maintain a relationship with the parents, she's given an impossible task that she's bound to fail at and bound to feel shame over it. Which means that any shame and guilt that you feel is completely undeserved. When we start to noticing these patterns, we can start asking ourselves questions. But it depends on how we ask them. So I could say, why am I behaving this way? Now, is that a question?
No, it's an indictment.
It's an indictment. But I said, I wonder why I'm behaving that way. So we need to begin to develop that compassionate curiosity towards the self, where we start looking not to why did I, not this indictment as you say, but genuine curiosity. And from that perspective, everything, pretty much everything anybody thinks is wrong with them is actually begins as an adaptation, or it begins as a failure of development because the conditions for development were not adequate. And so then we can understand. Now, it's not a question of being victims. That's the last thing we want to do, is to foster victim mentality. They did this to me and now I can't help it. No, that happened and it's your responsibility and it's your capacity to change that now. So you have to drop the victim mode altogether, but that doesn't mean that we don't recognize what happened. So to say that stuff happened to you, and I get the sense that something big happened that you haven't articulated yet, but something big happened to you at some point, to recognize that is not to say that you're a victim. It's just to say that whatever happened had certain impacts and fostered certain adaptations on your part that made you behave and undermine your development in a certain way. Here's the question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
How did you feel when this happened?
I felt very confused and scared.
Confused and scared. Good enough. Who did you speak to about it?
No one.
Okay. Now, if something like this happened to one of your daughters in was it grade 4?
Yeah.
Okay. If one of these things happened to Sawyer or Kendall in grade 4, and if they didn't talk to you, how would you explain that?
I'd feel, how would I explain it? I would explain it, and I'm about to go intellectual. I personally, as the mother, would feel heartbroken.
I understand how you'd feel, but really I'm not asking how you'd feel.
Okay, so
I'm asking how you'd explain it. Why wasn't my daughter talking to me about feeling scared and confused and violated? Why?
Because she didn't feel safe talking to me.
That's the trauma. The trauma began before that happened. Because if you had been able to talk to your parents and they would have said, this is awful, you must feel terrible, come here, let me hold you, and let's deal with the situation, So the trauma is not only in what happened, it's that you were so alone with what happened. And that aloneness was yours before this traumatic event ever occurred. As a matter of fact, abusers can tell with almost laser-like accuracy who's defended and protected and who's not, who can be victimized and who cannot. So that your primary traumatic event was not this event. Not that this wasn't traumatic, of course it was hugely traumatic, but it became hugely traumatic because you were alone. And that sense of lack of safety and lack of protection. Furthermore, you may not even have wanted to bother your parents because they were already stressed enough already. You were protecting them. That's the primary traumatic situation. It's an adaptation. So that's what I would say about that incident.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but again, the problem is in the environment, in the lack of being held and being seen. So there's nothing, and then in your initial impulse when you began that narrative about how it's not as bad as what happened,
Right.
Would you say that to your great?
No.
If your daughter comes to you and says, "Oh, it's not so bad. Think of all the kids that are, being beaten," or so that lack of self-compassion is one of the ways that trauma shows up, and that's what I'm saying. The healing needs to begin with some compassionate curiosity towards the self, not why, but why. It's a totally different conversation. But as long as we're running on default mode and we're just reacting to stuff, there's no freedom in it. We're actually like puppets on a string. And if you remember Pinocchio, when he becomes a real boy, he says, how foolish I was when I was a puppet. Well, we're all puppets in that sense. As long as these traumatic impacts are running our lives, we're puppets on a string, and those strings are unconscious. So it's the whole thing about becoming really free, and that real freedom depends on looking at how it was and getting in touch with our capacity to take responsibility now. So what really the work is for all of us is how to become free, so we can be in the present moment, connected to ourselves. The great trauma psychologist Peter Levine says, you're no longer living under the tyranny of the past. And it's totally available. It's totally possible. So that's actually the first step, is to recognize one's suffering rather than taking it for granted, which incidentally is the Buddha's first teaching, is that life is dukkha, life brings suffering, And then the second question is, okay, why? So it does begin with recognizing the suffering rather than denying it and running away from it. And there's many ways to run away from our pain, through certain behaviors and addictions. And the point is, stop running from your pain. Accept that it's there and be curious about it without blaming yourself for it. So those are the first steps. And then you ask for help. I mean, if help is available, the natural, we're born seeking help. You've never met a 1-day-old infant who doesn't know ask for help. But let me ask you a question. How easy it has been going back for you to ask for help?
You mean if I think about when I was in 4th grade?
Then and even decades later, can you ask for help? Or is that a challenge for you? But whatever they do, and wherever they go in the enchanted forest, a little boy and his bear will always be playing together. And that passage as an adult would bring me to tears. Because as a kid, as an infant, I wasn't played with. My mother was way too terrorized and depressed to play with me. And kids, peekaboo, play starts so early. It's essential for our mental health. It's essential for our brain development. So these poor people who were looking back on their lives and saying, I wish I had played more. Play is just essential. And I have to say that one of the things that has kept our marriage going 55 years now is that we play so well together. And we're just playing all the time when we're not fighting, which by the way is long gone. Not long gone, but gone. Play is just essential.
And you weren't played with, so did you play with your kids?
It's interesting. I have 2 brothers. They're both intuitively playful with young kids. They just know how to be with them, how to pretend, how to just get into their space. I watch them and I don't know how the hell they do it, because I didn't know how to play with my kids. Not really. I kind of faked it, but I always kept waiting for them to develop minds that I could engage with verbally, because on that verbal level, I'm very comfortable. On the play level, I wasn't. I was rather stiff. I wish I was a grandfather. I'm not yet, because I learned how to play. I'd let that infant teach me how to play. But no, I didn't know how to play. I didn't know how to play. I really lacked that, because it wasn't given to me when I was small. My brothers had it. Now, they grew up under very different circumstances. They didn't have the same parents, in the way we talked about it. So they know how to play. I don't. With kids, I mean.
If no one told you this before, I want you to know you are never meant to carry all of that alone. The guilt, the silence, the weight of keeping the peace. None of it was yours to begin with, but healing is. And every time you choose curiosity over shame, softness over self-blame, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. So please, don't give up on yourself. You're not broken. You're becoming. And this journey you're on, it's holy.